for generations of children, the name Fred Rogers conjured something rare, a sense of being truly seen, heard, and safe. His soft-spoken voice, his gentle routines, and his unflinching belief that every child mattered made him one of the most beloved figures in television history. Yet behind the cardigan and the quiet smile was a man far more layered than the cameras ever revealed. His widow, Joanne Rogers, eventually chose to share a truth about the man she knew best, not a scandalous secret, but something deeply personal, achingly human, and ultimately more powerful than any perfect image could ever be. A neighborhood built on stillness. When Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood first aired on PBS in 1968, it stood apart from everything else on television. There were no flashing lights, no zany sound effects, no rapid-fire storytelling designed to keep restless kids glued to the screen. Instead, Fred Rogers would walk through the door, hang up his coat, slip into one of his iconic cardigans, swap his dress shoes for sneakers, and begin singing "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" It felt less like a television program and more like a visit from someone who genuinely cared. That was entirely the point. Fred built the show as an emotional classroom, a space where children could learn not just numbers and letters, but how to navigate the complicated inner world of feelings. Divorce, death, race, disability, topics that other programs avoided or glossed over, were addressed on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood with honesty and tenderness, never talking down to its young audience. The show moved slowly, deliberately, because Fred understood that children didn't need more noise. They needed stillness. They needed someone who treated their feelings as real and worthy of attention. Episodes also dipped into the whimsical neighborhood of make-believe, where puppets like King Friday the 13th, Daniel Tiger, and Lady Elaine Fairchild acted out small dramas mirroring real-life situations. Fred voiced several of these characters himself, each one reflecting a different facet of his own personality. Over 31 seasons, from 1968 to 2001, the show produced 895 episodes, an extraordinary run for a program built entirely on the strength of one man's quiet conviction. For children growing up in chaotic homes or feeling out of place in the world, those 30 minutes with Mr. Rogers often felt like the safest part of the day. The show's guest list occasionally added a touch of brightness to its calm atmosphere. Yo-Yo Ma showed children how music could express what words could not. Julia Child brought her warmth into Fred's kitchen. LeVar Burton visited as a fellow advocate for literacy. Even Coco, the gorilla, communicating through sign language, shared an unforgettable moment of genuine connection with Fred on screen. Every guest, famous or not, was treated with the same dignity Fred extended to his youngest viewers. The television industry recognized the show's excellence with 4 Daytime Emmy Awards and 55 nominations. In 1997, Fred received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Daytime Emmys and used his acceptance speech to ask the entire audience to pause for 10 seconds of silence, to think about the people who helped them become who they are. The room went completely still. It was pure Fred Rogers, the woman who stood beside him. To understand Fred Rogers fully, you have to meet Joan Bird, the woman who would become his wife and in many ways his anchor. Born in 1928 in Jacksonville, Florida, Joan grew up in a household that valued curiosity, meaningful conversation, and music above almost everything else. From an early age, she demonstrated a remarkable gift for the piano, playing not to impress, but because it made her feel alive. She explored classical music, jazz, and folk tunes with equal devotion, eventually earning a place at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, where she majored in music performance. At Rollins, Joan stood out not only for her technical skill, but for the soul she brought to every performance. She wasn't chasing fame or recognition. What she valued most were deep friendships, honest conversations, and a sense of community. She later continued her studies at Florida State University and Carnegie Tech, now Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, sharpening her craft and growing into a woman of independent spirit and quiet confidence. She taught music at Chatham College's preparatory school in the 1950s and later at Carlow College in the early 1970s. As a concert pianist, she performed as part of a duo with her longtime friend Janine Morrison, recording 2 albums together. She was, in every sense, a woman with her own rich story, long before she became known as Mrs. Fred Rogers. A love built on shared rhythm. Fred and Joanne first crossed paths at Rollins College in the late 1940s. Both were music majors, both deeply committed to their craft, and neither was looking for what they found. What caught Joanne's attention wasn't Fred's charm or his potential, it was the way he listened, really listened, and the rare softness with which he treated everyone around him. Their connection deepened through shared practice rooms, piano labs, and recitals. It wasn't a relationship built on grand gestures or candlelit evenings. It was something sturdier, a partnership rooted in shared rhythm, intellectual honesty, and emotional safety. After college, life separated them. Fred moved to New York for a job with NBC, while Joanne remained in Florida. Without the convenience of modern communication, their relationship survived on handwritten letters. Envelopes carrying not just words, but layers of longing, care, and deepening trust. Then came the proposal, tucked inside one of those letters. Joanne was so overwhelmed that she ran to a nearby phone booth to say yes, nearly losing the letter in her hurry. She kept it safe after that. They married in 1952 and built a life together that would stretch across more than 5 decades. Their marriage was alive and real, funny and sometimes messy, never a displayed piece. Music remained a thread running through their bond. The two often played piano duets together, delighting in the harmony and laughing at the occasional wrong note. They had 2 sons, James and John. At home, Joanne was the emotional backbone of the family. She protected Fred's creative space, challenged him when necessary, and understood his silences in a way few others could. She never tried to change him, and that may have been the greatest gift she gave him. The man the camera never captured. The public image of Fred Rogers was one of effortless calm and boundless kindness. And for the most part, that image was genuine. Fred lived what he taught. His colleagues and friends consistently confirmed that the man off camera was not so different from the man on it. But Joanne was careful to offer the world a more complete portrait. Fred, she said, was no saint, not in a damaging sense, but in the most honest one. He got tired. He doubted himself. He dealt with stress and the quiet pressure of knowing that millions of children were looking to him as a source of comfort and stability. His routines were legendary in their discipline. He swam every morning and maintained his weight at exactly 143 pounds for most of his adult life, a number that held deep personal meaning. 1 letter in I for in love, 3 in you. It was a small, private ritual with a quietly enormous message. But behind that discipline was a man who felt the weight of his mission acutely. Joanne was the one who saw the tired days, the moments of self-doubt, the toll that carrying so much emotional responsibility could quietly take. She was often the one handling discipline with their sons, since Fred, true to form, found that harder to do. The load wasn't always evenly shared in their marriage, like all real marriages had its own tests and imbalances. What makes this so meaningful is precisely how human it all is. Fred Rogers didn't float above the struggles of ordinary life. He moved through them, just like everyone else. He simply chose again and again to respond with patience and love rather than frustration. That daily choice, Joanne understood, was what transformed a reserved man in a cardigan into something lasting. The awful truth. The phrase awful truth might suggest something scandalous, but what Joanne Rogers revealed about Fred's final chapter is something far more delicate and in many ways far harder to share. In the last years of his life, Fred was diagnosed with stomach cancer. It began quietly, as these things often do. Some discomfort, a little indigestion, easy to explain away. Joanne recalls how Fred tried to manage it himself at first, careful about what he ate, patient with the growing unease. But when the pain became impossible to ignore, they sought answers, and the news was devastating. The cancer had spread, and the outlook was not good. Those final months brought a different kind of vulnerability to the surface. Fred, the man who had spent decades offering certainty and warmth to others, found himself navigating fear and physical suffering in private. Yet, he kept pushing forward with remarkable determination. In January 2003, just weeks before his death, he appeared as the Grand Marshal of the Rose Parade in Pasadena, honoring his commitments even as his body was failing. After surgery to remove part of his stomach, he came home and found small moments of peace by sitting at the piano. He passed away quietly on February 27, 2003, surrounded by family, just one day after his grandson's birthday. Joanne held many of these details close for years, out of respect for Fred's privacy. But as time passed, she came to believe that keeping this side of him hidden wasn't fair, not to his story, and not the people who loved him. By speaking honestly about his final days, she felt she could honor him more completely. She spoke of how illness shifted the dynamic of their relationship, placing her in the role of caregiver, a position that brought both immense love and an emotional weight she had not anticipated. Watching someone so full of life face such a difficult battle was, she admitted, exhausting in ways that didn't always have words. What she shared wasn't meant to diminish Fred's legacy. It was meant to deepen it. Fred Rogers maintained his sense of humor through the hardest days of his illness. He kept finding small moments of light, and when the end was near, Joanne sat with him and told him they were going to be okay, that the boys would be fine, that she would try to be fine. She believed that when he went in peace and even in joy, keeping the neighborhood alive. After Fred's passing, many expected Joanne to grieve quietly and step back from public life. Instead, she stepped forward. She became the chair emerita of Fred Rogers Productions, ensuring that the values at the heart of his work continued to shape children's media. Shows like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood carried on his mission, built on the same foundation of emotional honesty and gentleness he had established decades earlier. Joanne appeared in documentaries and interviews, spoke at public events, and even made a memorable cameo in the 2019 film A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, a small but meaningful gesture that added a real, personal dimension to Fred's story on screen. She also continued to honor her own identity as a musician, never allowing herself to be reduced to simply Fred's widow. Her humor, her groundedness, and her wisdom were traits that people who knew her spoke of consistently. She carried Fred's legacy not as a caretaker of a museum exhibit, but as a living, active participant in the ongoing conversation about kindness, empathy, and what it means to be a good neighbor. Joanne Rogers passed away on January 14, 2021, at the age of 92 in their Pittsburgh home, surrounded by loved ones. She is survived by their 2 sons and by a legacy as heartfelt and enduring as the one she spent decades helping to protect. Together, Fred and Joanne Rogers demonstrated something quietly radical, that love doesn't have to be loud to be transformative. That kindness isn't effortless, it's a choice made daily, even on the hard days. And that the truest measure of a person isn't how perfect they appeared, but how honestly and fully they lived. Fred Rogers once said that the greatest gift you can give is your honest self. In the end, Joanne gave us that same gift by showing us the real man behind the cardigan and letting us love him all the more for it.